Welcome back, everybody, to the No Clue Inc. podcast, Adventures in Running a Business for Beginners. Today, I'm here with professional boudoir photographer, Meagan Thomas, a dear friend of mine. I would dare say the leading boudoir photographer in Atlanta.
I don't know if I could say that. I think that there are many really amazing, beautiful boudoir photographers, some of which I'm close friends with, but this is what I do. This is how I make my living. This is all that I do. So that's true.
Yeah. Well, the reason I'm so excited about this podcast today, and we're doing it in person, it's a little bit different for both of us, in her studio here today, but Meagan has built from the ground up, 9 years old now, the business. Started out doing wedding photography and now does very high-end boudoir photography. And when I say high-end, you have built a business that is well into the six figures.
Yeah, I have.
Yeah. She's not inexpensive. It's an investment.
I know that. Investment.
And is now doing photography on a global level.
I do quite a bit of travel. Yes.
Yeah.
I was just in Santa Barbara yesterday.
And then I saw you took a trip to, what was it? Was it Africa that you went to?
I did. Yeah. So Tanzania. So I'll take you kind of through the arc, if you will.
So I want to hear from the beginning, because when we talk about business ownership and entrepreneurs, we talk to women and men that started from scratch. And a lot of them were working their corporate jobs, or they were dabbling in their businesses. And then one day something clicked. This is for a lot of entrepreneurs, something clicked and they said, I'm going to do this full time and I'm going to make a full run at it. So what were you doing before you started your photography business?
So I grew up acting and I really wanted to fulfill that dream. I started acting when I was 6 years old. Went to school for marketing at UGA. And then when I graduated, got a job basically in advertising. One of my first jobs in advertising was actually for a wedding photographer. And I worked for him as a marketing person. But when I was hired, he was like, would you be interested in learning shooting? And I was salaried, but he was like, I would basically, if you want a second shoot with me, I would work your week where you work like Tuesday through Saturday and have Sunday, Monday off. So that's how I learned photography. That's how I was kind of introduced to this as a business. And I've always been artistic, but honestly, I suck at art. Like, I am not a good painter. My handwriting sucks. So when it comes to having something artistic that I can express, like acting works really well because the medium is my body, right?
Yeah.
Well, photography is not that much different, because even as an actress, like I had to think about my own framing, like when I'm in a shot and I have to talk to people, like, so when you get to know the camera from the other side, it becomes a lot easier to then go behind. And that's why I'm really good at my posing. Like, I know when I don't believe you. I know when I think you're faking it. I know what to tell you to do to make it look believable. And that's why, like, I think people see my photography and they're like, oh, every woman must be so turned on in your studio. And it's like, no. And if they were, that would be so awkward for both of us. It's just more like it breaks down to such concrete little pieces. And then once that was kind of a proven concept and I'd been open, so I started my photography business in 2010. I opened the Boudoir studio in 2014. And then I had my first full session in 2015 in April. So it's literally been 9 years ago to the month that I really opened and launched the studio for what I wanted it to be. Because again, I was following a luxury business model because I knew before I opened my studio, I did what I called minis, which meant like you had 1 hour with me. It was really quick and you got beautiful images, but I noticed by like minute 45 is when we were really starting to cook and then they were done. And I was like, I want that to be where we start, And so that's when I started to kind of play around with the different business models. And I didn't want to be the photographer that's doing 10 people a day. And so if I'm doing like a couple people a week, what is that price point and what does that entail? And so that's where now they come in and their session is 4 or 5 hours because hair and makeup takes an hour and a half, 2 hours, but it's really helpful for me because not only do I enjoy this part, but I sit and chat. Like I pull up in my slippers with my coffee, like we'll get to know like, how are you? And sometimes it's like, oh my God, I'm so excited about my wedding and on and on about details. And sometimes it's like, oh my God, I just got divorced and I don't know who I am. And I don't know how I'm gonna deal with this, with the kids. And sometimes it was just like, I've always been the funny one and I just want to feel beautiful. Like it didn't matter why they were there. It just mattered to me that there was more time invested and we could carve out and dedicate more. And me having those conversations, it also dictated the shoot. Like I would take some of those details. And then as I did that, I started to do some solo traveling. At the time I was married and my ex wasn't really as interested in going everywhere. And so I was like, all right, well, I'm still going to go even if you don't want to. And so I thought I'll make money at it. Like, let me see if I can figure this out. And I found this company called Adventure Women. Yeah. So they do small group travel for women. Okay. And in 2018, I went to Japan with them and then I went to Indonesia. Japan was to meet the owner of this company to see if we're a fit, because one of the things I realized is that I can't be in charge of logistics when we're on these trips. because you have to like me and trust me.
Yeah.
So if I'm the one banging on your door at 9 a.m. because we need to be downstairs for the shuttle, you're not going to like me very much for your shoot that evening. And so, so having someone else take on all of that. And if you get sick, there was a woman we were hiking a pilgrimage trail in Japan, and she got bronchitis induced pneumonia or something like that. It was very interesting, but she had to go to a hospital and get a steroid shot. I don't know how I would have handled that in Japan. And you can even guess at at least sometimes in Europe, I'm like, oh, I think this is kind of the thing. Like, no idea. So that helped me understand how I wanted to do the international stuff. And then from there, I went to Indonesia with them, and I brought a past client just to test my equipment to see what else I needed to purchase. Cause again, I never check equipment. I got to carry it on my person, which is heavy. And so I'm 18 hours and you're going through multiple airports and you just want to consolidate that. So I kind of tested my process then. And then I've used them. Like, we were supposed to do Tanzania. Unfortunately, that was 2020. It was a sold out trip. We had to not do Tanzania. We actually ended up doing Baja that year. It was like a private island type of experience, which was amazing.
Yeah.
But it just opened up a different avenue. So I've still got my studio, and that's what I do. That's my main 90% bread and butter.
I find it interesting because it doesn't matter what vertical you're in. Every type of business owner, everyone, it doesn't matter if you're in real estate, if you are a franchisee, you're a photographer, you're an attorney. I've interviewed so many entrepreneurs so far, and everything is circling around this customer experience. The buzzword now is, I feel like the buzzword a year ago was authentic. Everybody's like, be authentic. Okay. Now it's customer experience. And what's interesting is that you knew how to do photography. And from the get-go, you didn't love the model of the customer experience, really. So you came up with your own thing. And I know because you did. I've been your client. It wasn't, it is an investment. Yeah. It is so fun. Yeah. And it was like, what was it, 5 or 6 hours? I was sore the next day.
Well, I think you and I got real chatty. We may have been 6 or 7.
I find it interesting that you honed in on that, and good for you that you were like, you know what? I'm going to come in at a higher price point. It's going to be a full-on experience. And the one thing I always say when people ask me about boudoir photography, it's got to be quality, but it's not about the sex. The experience with you is about, for me personally, and I've heard this from many of your clients, it's about self-affirmation. When you walk away from that session, yes, you're doing it for your wedding or whatever your reason is, but it was almost like therapy. It was so body affirming. Yeah. And that's you. Like, you are selling an experience while being authentic and making sure that your work shows. And you have built this phenomenal.
Thanks.
I don't know many photographers that have quite the business model that you have built. Truly. Thank you. You're killing it. So tell me about your background, because I want to know how you go from shooting weddings, because someone out there right now is like, I love photography. I do it on the side. I shoot some weddings here and there, but I actually work at Coca-Cola as my corporate job.
Right. Sure.
I would love to do this, full time. What advice would you give them? What would you say?
I would say, I think the beautiful thing about photography is it's a very flexible medium. There are other maybe hobbies or dreams or career paths that are much more all-encompassing. You have to go back to school, or you gotta take certain steps to get there. Photography is this thing where if you wanted it to be this hobby that you shoot one session a month, and like you're a busy mom and you're just like, but I really love the creativity of it and I want to take my time with the editing, you can build a business like that. You can also build it where if you have more time and you want it to be, and there may be some people who actually want to have like 10 people a day in their studio. I think it comes down to what your energy levels are, like what you have available. And then photography can just kind of seamlessly slide into whatever you want that to look like. I know so many of my clients who are moms, and they love taking family shots, or they love doing newborn photo, or I have one that does pet photography. Like, there's another one who's trying to do like landscape stuff that they sell to. The photography is such an open medium. Yeah. It's just a matter of finding, and even for me, like, I love kids. I do not love taking kids' pictures. I don't, because I'm a control freak and I know what I charge, and I want to be able to prove that I'm worth like double. And sometimes with kids, like, girl, it don't matter how pretty that backdrop is. They don't care if there's a rainbow in the background. They're like, where are my snacks? Are we done yet? Yeah. Like, it is
it's so unpredictable. And
it's so unpredictable.
And it is very stressful.
Yes. And for me, I am not somebody, charging money was difficult for me.
Really?
And yes, I definitely always had to be pressed impressed, and either from taxes or from my accountant, like walking me through,
Who
like
impressed you?
definitely my accountant first. Like my accountant was the one that
How'd you find your accountant?
Actually I joined this business to business thing called Power Core. It literally is. And honestly, it's great for most. I don't know if it's a great fit for me, but I did meet some really amazing people like my accountant, like that I still work with. But no, he just broke down the numbers. He was like, okay, so how many, if you're not able to do more than one a day and you can't physically do more than however many a week, here's what the numbers look like. But your average sale needs to be over $1,500. This is when I first started. Now my average sale now is $4,000. That's my average.
Yeah.
My highest sale has been $12,000 for one session. So
was that local in Atlanta or was that like remote?
No, those were both local. All, yeah. And 90%.
Because you travel to people.
I do. Yes. Like I just did Santa Barbara and I did 2 there. The sales average kind of stays consistent. There are some additional charges when I do travel. Like, so they're
airfare, hotel and all
that. Yeah. So I'm not out that cost, but no, I would say that overall, like the sales average doesn't really change based on like, I mean, I guess people who do travel spend a little bit more because they're more excited about their photos and they want to get some wall art or remember everything. But no, I would say that overall the average stays the same.
So when was the point? So your accountant says, okay, Meagan, you need to hit this revenue.
Yes. He tells me that. I took that and I said, okay, so I got my degree in marketing. I'm great at marketing. I want to say I'm not going to.
You are good at marketing.
Thank you. I am not going to take away from my art. Like I do think I'm a phenomenal artist, but there are so many phenomenal photographers in this city who can't make a living. And it's not because they're not.
Why is that? Why is it?
I would argue they're not business minded, or I would argue it's just like, right now it's hard. Like I would say there has been a significant shift in marketplace since the pandemic. And I don't think we're seeing all of the fallout from that yet. But I think what it does is it makes it unpredictable. Doesn't mean you can't do it.
Yeah.
And again, photography is one of the easier ones because you can dabble in it. You're not having to quit your full-time job. Shoot on the weekends. My advice to someone who's getting into it for the first time, fill up your weekends, because that's what I did. And what it showed me was not only on a week where I'm exhausted, I come home on a Friday night, I was pumped to shoot the next day. If it's a job, I'm annoyed that I gave myself something to do the next day. So fill up your weekends until my rule of thumb, and I was married at the time, I told my ex-husband, I was like, I'm going to keep doing this and I will not quit my job until I physically cannot handle the work I'm getting in without quitting. And so it only took about 6 months. And then, and then we transitioned. But that first year was also scary. So I made that jump. It didn't mean I was like, business was banging on the door the whole time. It was just like, I got to the point where I was like, I can't do both.
Yeah.
So I made the leap, and then it was a scary year. And but you know
what was scary about it? Like financially it was scary.
Financially it was scary. Like it was like, I quit when I was so busy, but then of course, like, if you got to get things in the pipeline. So there were like holes in the year. I would say I also was just figuring it out, like being an entrepreneur. Like there is something that I feel like is implanted in us. And I don't honestly know if the generation below us will have this, but our parents did the college thing to the job thing, which was a career thing, which was security, right? When they did all that, they did it and they knew they were going to get this bonus every year. They were going to naturally be able to graduate. They were going to graduate throughout the ranks. They were going to end at this place. It was all this guarantee.
Yeah.
I didn't have that. I graduated in 2008. Like literally like in the middle of the crash. So I think that there is a shift going on around like security. Like what used to be secure is no longer even remotely a thing.
Yeah.
And even this year, I mean, I had 10 reschedules this first quarter.
Yeah.
That is I don't think I've had 10 reschedules my entire time open. But even as someone who's been well seasoned in this business, I hit 6 figures in my first year. I wasn't even open for the full year of that first year. I opened in I had that, like I said, April.
Yeah.
So in that time frame, hit 6 figures. The success was very quick. But continuing to understand and being able to predict what's coming and keep it coming and keep it flowing, that is more difficult. And I will say some people aren't cut out for it. Like, I don't believe there is a hierarchy in entrepreneurship is better than corporate America. I think it's different people and what are you built for?
Right.
I happen to be built better for that type of stress. I prefer to have can I make this payment this month? Like if that is the thought process, then I would rather be in the control. Like, okay, I'll take more sessions or I'll market this way.
Yeah.
If I'm working for corporate America, what am I going to do? Ask my boss for like an advance or like a raise, and you can, but for me, that was a better fit. But I do also believe, like, for instance, my brother, one of my best friends, I don't think he had that type of stress would really wear on him. So I think it's one of those, like, you do have to be comfortable with that kind of like, all right, we're going to pull ourselves up from our bootstraps, and it doesn't go away. I have had one of the most serendipitous experiences as a photographer. I make more than most photographers that I know.
Yeah.
And yet this year alone, I was like, oh shoot. really trying to temper my 4-letter words. But even this, like having to be like, okay, well, if this happens, then this, then this. And I would say then if you're like, I don't know what kind of person I am, then how do you pivot?
Yes.
Ask yourself how you pivot. And does it come naturally, or does pivoting sound scary to you? For some people, pivoting is like having to have a new plan and having to start all over. And so they can't take those steps. And for people like me, I'm like, oh, okay, we'll just, let's do this.
Yeah.
So I think, again, it comes down to the person, but
well, and before we started this podcast, we were saying like, you're just kind of making it up. A lot of entrepreneurship is like making it up. And then something happens and you're like, oh, let me pivot. Let me try this.
Yep.
And I had somebody the other day, and you're right. There are people that, and my dad's the same way. I grew up, my dad's favorite thing was don't quit a job till you have a job.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh.
I got that too.
I can't believe you would, start this business and you've got this great opportunity and you've got these benefits and you've got this. But then I also in the same breath had someone say to a very successful entrepreneur that I very much respect. We were talking on the phone the other day and we were talking about salary. And he said, Casey, any wealth that you have ever built up to this point, has it come from a salary? Mm-hmm. And I said, no, because it hasn't. It's come from risk, because I've always been in sales. And when I was in corporate, I had a salary, but then I always had a chance for bonus. And I can't imagine being pigeonholed into a position where like you just have a salary and the only way you're going to increase your income is to switch jobs or ask for a raise or something like that. So, in that same breath, where do you see, what I've noticed is that you've evolved your business. It was predominantly women, couples, like lesbian couples, gay couples.
Yeah.
Doing a lot of husband and wife stuff. So how do you continue to evolve into different markets? Because it's easy for an entrepreneur to get pigeonholed into like, this is your niche, this is what you do. But the fact that you've been able to reinvent different markets for yourself, I almost consider you've got your business here in Atlanta, but you could just live off of. But then your international stuff almost seems like its own new business, right? Like you're taking women-specific only trips on these excursions, which feels almost like event planning to me, but you kind of elated to how you're doing that. But you are also tapping into this new market that I keep seeing of same-sex couples.
Yeah.
Like, how does that happen?
I think that is partly and some of this is the marketing that you're getting to see, right? Because I also don't control, many of my clients aren't comfortable with me using their photos. So it also partly is like, what is available for me to like show the new studio space, et cetera. Right. I don't think that I move as strategically as that makes it sound. It is strategic, but it's not so much like I'm going to really focus on, homosexual couples. Like I love everyone to experience what it feels like to feel beautiful. I think what I do is pay attention to where the business is. And I do know that like in any medium, this is probably true across business period, but I would say specifically for any kind of medium that includes some type of technology, and which mine does, right? A camera, Photoshop. Yeah. Now we've got AI. Now we've got, like if you aren't continuing to lean in, I just want to keep getting better. Yeah. I'll be so annoyed if I look at my art and it's the same stuff that I was shooting 5 years ago. Like I want to see growth. That's a personal desire for me. But part of that is putting myself is risk. Like you're saying, it's like, and after a certain point, like when I've shot in so many hotel rooms and so many studios that like indoors, I don't care. It's like, I don't care if we're at Publix. I could make a really hot shot happen at Publix. I would make it happen. But I think for me, it's about continuing to lean into what is available. Like, so when I popped out there and was like, oh, who wants to go traveling? Like part of it is just being vulnerable enough to say it. And I will say, I am that awkward. I have no issue being the person that's like, says it. And no one wants that. Okay, well, I'll go back to the drawing board and I'll come back to you guys later. Like, I don't feel as tied to that. So I think I cast my net often. And I think that is something that is different than what I see a lot of entrepreneurs do. Most entrepreneurs, especially as you become more successful, you think even more you have to get it all together. Oh no, I can't announce that till we've got the marketing, we've got the thing in place, we've got the budget, we know we're going to boost on Facebook for this, Instagram on this. Like, I will cast the net. And I will and the good thing about the way that I've built my business is that also my girls, like for instance, I am a phenomenal photographer, but they cannot feel like I'm so professional that it's clinical. They cannot get here. And chastely shake their hand and say, welcome to the studio. This is where you get rid of it. Like, I won't get the magic that I get. The reason I get the magic I get is because I am going to plop down on the couch with you and have a conversation. And then who knows, maybe we'll talk about my divorce or your divorce, or maybe we'll talk about marriage, or maybe we're going to talk about womanhood or mom. Like, I just lean into whatever is offered. And then from there is kind of where I'll continue to build the direction I'm going. And that can shake down to, again, international. International came about because I was traveling internationally alone. And I was struck on a personal level of like, wow, the same things that happen in the studio happen when you travel alone as a woman. It's scary. You may not know if you can do it. There's a little bit of that like trepidation, and excitement. And when you do, you get this other viewpoint of not just you, but the world. And then you bring all that with you when you go back to your life. And that is very echoing of the Boudoir experience. So on one hand, I also just chase what I love. Like, I know that people who are happy and thriving will give back to this world what they were meant to give back. Yes. So for me, I'm happy and thriving when I get to talk to people, when I get to hear their stories, when I get to travel to beautiful new locations and meet the local culture. And if I can make money at that, I am so here for that, right?
And your clientele followed you. Like, I saw some clients that you had that were like, I'm there. And, I know that wasn't not an inexpensive trip, but I thought, man, Meagan is really, cheers to that. Cheers to you.
Thank you.
For casting your net.
Yes, cast your net. That's a big one, though.
Cast your net and just don't. You're right. Because when you have a little bit of experience under your belt and they're like, oh, Meagan's a successful business owner, you feel, you're like, oh, I can't start something new because I don't have it all figured out right now. Like even today I posted something about a new business venture, this e-bikes thing. I'm like, oh my God, people are like, oh my gosh, this is so unprofessional. Oh, but everybody, it's like going to the gym. Everybody is so worried about their own stuff online and what it looks like and what it posts like. And it's like, just cast your net.
Cast your net.
Because remember back in the day when there was just a phone book and a phone. Mm-hmm. And that's how people built their businesses. Mm-hmm. It's like now we have all this technology and we get caught up in it. So, okay, I want to hear about what your vision is, because you've hired a team. Mm-hmm. You've had employees for a while.
I have, yes. So I have a hair and makeup team. I have, I just hired a new studio manager who, it's hard to call her that because she's also one of my best friends. I mean, again, I think that.
So you're paying people.
Oh yeah.
They're on your payroll.
100%. Yes.
How is that for you?
That is actually easy. Like that, I hire too late.
Yeah.
So by the time I hire.
Most people do.
Yes. Yeah. And by the time I hire, the money is not the thing. It is like, it is so needed at that point that it's not like, oh gosh, the only time that I was like, physically daunted by financial was when I opened my first studio. And I was like, how much am I paying a month in rent? And how much am I and how much is the rent?
I'm just curious.
The first year my first studio was $2,000 a month. My second studio was $3,000 and went up to $3,300. And then this place is $4,000 a month.
Okay.
So, I mean, so
you've got an investment in there.
It is. Well, I mean, not really, I'm renting. So like, but it is an investment, and it is, that was scary. That was one of those, I remember I had a crying in the shower moment. Like I had a good marketing plan. So when I opened my studio and my accountant told me how much I was supposed to charge, and I kind of went and worked through I was like, no one's going to pay this for photography. Like I have just told someone I'm going to pay them $2,000 a month, and I signed for 2 years. So that is $24,000 a year. And in my mind, I'm like, and I'm supposed to make money. And I literally did one of those, like go in the shower, sit on the floor and cry. Yeah. And then I was like, okay, one of the ways that I deal with those moments of doubt is I go, then what? I give myself the space. So if I need to cry, if I need to have a minute, I will take whatever time that is. But then what? Okay, so what's our biggest fear? We're not going to have any clients. What will we do if we don't have any clients? We've got the space. Well, we could rent it out to other photographers. All right, well, if no photographers book, well, we could rent it out to like small event place. Okay. Yeah. And I keep going until I feel secure. Mm-hmm. Like literally to the point where it's like, I could renegotiate my contract. I could get out of my contract. I can, I will keep going until I feel that like, okay, we've got this under control. Yeah. So the then what was very helpful, but I feel like with taking on financial burden, I think it's hard to speak because I'll speak for photographers specifically. Sometimes I feel like when clients are banging down the door and whatever, they go, oh, I've got to get better equipment. I've got to go take this class. And it doesn't mean you don't need to work on your craft, but do you know how much you can work on your craft for free? It's real. You can go rent stuff for like $30 an hour or $30 for the day, and go and try lighting and stuff. You don't necessarily have to go drop thousands of dollars that now you're out that isn't going to return you business. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think for me, I've always been very clear on cost over benefit. And so I know when to pull that. I know when it's like, no, my laptop is literally opening each image and it's taking 60 seconds. So if by spending the $4,000 or whatever to buy my new laptop, I'm going to cut out this much time on every single session. Now it's worth it.
Yeah.
But I don't make that step unless I know that that's going to move the bottom line.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of times, particularly for creative entrepreneurs, they're so attached to the artistic vision that they forget to be a business person first. And you have to be a business person first, or you won't, well, I can't say you won't make it, but it will be more difficult for you to make it, in my opinion. Again, and I can only say that because I know so many amazing artists who don't make money. And I'm like, oh my, you should out earn me times 4, but you don't because you don't know how to run a business.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
How many creatives do you, is it mostly like split? Like I was curious between like the entrepreneurs that you're like interviewing, like how many of them are in a creative space?
So far there's about 3, but there's a lot of people in my life that are in the creative space.
Yeah.
A lot of writers, a couple people that are podcasters because, teaching podcasting is a thing now, a lot of AI people, a couple makeup artists.
Yep.
And they all do very well, the ones that I know, but I know that there's a lot that don't. And I think it's 2 things. I think they don't have the business sense, right? And also they're not, when you start a business, you have to have different levels. Like I kind of think of it as like whack-a-mole. Like
it's like pillars.
Yeah, you have like
you're building something.
You have 4 different things, and you're like, that's done, and now I have this to offer. And then when that gets kind of stale, now I have this to offer. And so, I was in a membership-based model, but it was always like an add-on. We're bringing in this, and I see you do a little bit of that, but I don't see you run a lot of specials.
I don't.
And you don't have to.
Well, that's the thing. I think that's where the whole business side comes. And I have like this. If you paid attention, like if this quarter I ran the first time I've ever done a 20% off wall art. I did that one day.
Yeah.
But that was also me trying to help my team. I did not. And to be fair, we fixed the reschedule policy. Like this will never be a thing again. But I think that's also where I don't know if I can say a lot of respect, but it's probably the most honest response. I don't have a lot of respect for business owners who don't own that. I can be in business and be making 6 figures, multiple 6 figures, and have a really bad first quarter and need to respond to it in a way that isn't just like, oh, it'll come back in the second quarter. Like, no.
Yeah.
It cannot. Like there are plenty, we've all seen Blockbuster was a mega corporation that didn't keep up with what needed to change and went under. Like we can see this play out if you want to look at it from like the millions, to where it's just like why would it be any different for a small business owner? But I think it's not necessarily about reinventing yourself. I think it's more, in fact, I feel like when I get too salesy, when I start getting like that scarcity mindset of like, oh gosh, it's not coming, no calls, no one's booking. I honestly feel like I make the worst decisions, and any of the decisions that I make in those spaces don't turn the same kind of response that everything else I do.
Yes.
When I can sit in that space and go, okay, I'm going to give this space to like the fear that I'm feeling and the anxiety. It's not like I'm being some kind of toxic positivity. Oh, it's fine. Like, no, earlier this quarter, I was like, even my makeup artist, my editor were all like, I'm sorry, you promised this much business. So I was like, I know, I don't know how this is happening, but I think that understanding that you have to remain in control of the pivot, and it may not be something as obvious as like, oh, I'm going to run a sale. Like understanding your client, understanding, like you brought up the client experience. The only way you can build a client experience is if you know who your client is and what they want, right?
Yeah.
So the first thing is to really understand, like to write out, like if there was a step 1 to what kind of business you want to, own, who are you serving, and write a profile and write it detailed. Where do they shop? What do they eat? What do they do in the morning? What's their daily routine? Do they have kids? Are they married? Are they old? Are they young? Are they ageless? Is there a race that stands out? Is there something that, oh, it's definitely the high-powered CEO who has no time and my service is going to help them, but understanding that client profile will then inform everything else. My client is not interested in not having their hair and makeup done. My client really wants to come and sit and be pampered, not because they necessarily want their hair and makeup done, because they want to rest. They are, I attract, and I know this, a very intelligent, high-powered, multitasking clientele. They are impressive when they walk in my studio. And I know no one, like, they take everything off of everybody else's plate. So my job when they walk in is to take it off of their plate so that they can get in a certain headspace so that I can give them what they're here for. But if I didn't understand that, and if I was like, if they're calling me 5 minutes before, and again, that shakes down the actual logistical thing. So that means if I'm getting a phone call even 30 minutes before an appointment and it's them, some people are like, oh, I don't want to pick it up. I don't want, like, no. It is vital that I answer as many questions as possible, that I give them as much information as possible, because it means that now they're already excited. If they're still having anxiety and stuff as they walk through my door, and then I'm playing catch up, right?
Yeah.
And I'm having to like backtrack and having to get them to where they're at neutral. And then what, we're halfway through hair and makeup. Whereas at halfway through hair and makeup, I should be able to say, oh, well, I've been talking to you too long. I'm going to go and get ready for your shoot. And now they're relaxed and they're, you know, like, I think understanding your client is key.
Yes. And you're taking the time to create the experience. And it is hard with people like you, is that it would be hard for you to teach someone else. Sure. When you get to the point where you're going to hire someone to do that for you, which you may never pass that off on because it's the magic of Meagan, but it's the magic of Meagan.
I like the magic of Meagan.
When I had my experience, I walked through the door and I was like, you know, terrified, like, oh my gosh, I'm about to take my clothes off for this woman. But over the phone, it was such a great pre-consult.
Yeah.
There was so much information. You know, I had a couple drinks, got my hair, I was like, I'm good. And it started off, you know, I think by the end of it, I was totally naked. You were like, let me try this shot. I'm like, oh my gosh, you know, and it was, so I went home that day and I'm like, I did this thing, you know, and then the next level, which is brilliant on your part, was the sale of the book, this beautiful binded book in its own cover with its own little cloth case with a bow. I mean, it's like $2,000. I mean, it's insane.
Yeah.
But it wasn't the sex of it, of my getting married, that made me want to spend the money. It was the experience that I had with you. Yeah. So as you continue to grow and scale, I think what a lot of entrepreneurs find, myself included, it's hard to verbalize to someone else what you want them to be doing to bring on the magic of Meagan, so you can continue to scale but not lose that personal touch. So how are you going to do that? Because you're gonna keep picking up, and the journey. And I'll say this too. So you know, if you go down the normal path of, you know, what most people do, you get married, you're being photographed a lot because you have engagement photos. And then you do a boudoir shoot. Then there's showers. Then your wedding photos. And okay. And then it evolves, and you're 9 years into marriage, like I am, and you have kids. And that book of what you did when you were a single woman, it has a whole new meaning, because you're looking at it going like, oh man, now I'm a mom and I'm cleaning up applesauce and oh my God, it was so hot, you know. So I see a vision for your business.
You are so hot.
Well, I see a vision for your business of almost like that client profile, but it's a life journey, and it changes because they get divorced, they have kids, and they, you know, like there's a whole, this is huge to open up for you. But how are you going to do that? How are you going to scale the business but keep the magic of Meagan? How are you going to do it? I don't know.
So I'm definitely not interested in scaling by hiring photographers for the reasons you mentioned, but more specifically for my assault victims. I'm actually in process. I'm going to become trauma informed, which is like a certification you can get. But because I come across so many women who have had, and it's
oh wow,
yeah, it's not necessarily this
took a turn. I didn't see it going this way.
Well, it's just something that I do come across, and so it's one of the things that made me realize very early I'm not interested in scaling that way for that exact reason. Like I had an abuse victim that showed up with her partner. It was a couple session, but she showed up with a black eye and marks on her body that I understand alternative lifestyles. I have no issue with that. As long as everything's legal and there's no kids or pets involved, like you enjoy yourself and enjoy your partner. That said, when there are physical marks on your body to the point where, again, no judgment, but that what I was looking at was abuse. Yeah. And I got to choose later to go take her to dinner and have a separate conversation. And I told her, what I'm seeing on your body, I want you to know is not normal. And I want you to be aware that and this was it's a long story, but she did end up breaking it off with him. And it took a few years. We had a few more dinners. But I took pictures of her marks, and I had the mark. To this day, I have them archived in case she ever needs them, because that was a decision that I felt comfortable making. Yeah. So meaning I don't know that I'm interested in scaling that way. And honestly, this is something that's different, and I'm not following a business book on this, but I really do believe it so deeply. I follow what I love. And so I believe that I will continue to do boudoir photography at the level that I'm at, and then maybe shift my year where maybe I shoot, like I've been looking at property overseas, and I may shift my year where I work, maybe I shoot 6 to 8 months out of the year. And then I have 4 to 6 months to do my other passion projects. I have a podcast I'd love to or multiple.
I have a place in Finland if you want to shoot in Finland. Oh my God. Seriously, you could shoot nothing but your sauna hat and
girl,
your ice pick.
I would.
I'm serious. In this beautiful
die.
walk. Yes.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
It's interesting to be in this spot. And it almost feels like a little bit of a dirty word, especially on the heels of a low quarter. But I just want to be super honest. I don't know that I am out to make more money. I feel super blessed that what I get to make. And from this place, I would want to just probably be a little wiser about like letting my wealth work for me. We've talked about that before. Like there are some ways that I can put my money to work for me.
Yes.
I want to.
And I definitely know, I told you about the girl I know.
Yes, we're going to, yes. But I say that because I think when it comes to scale for me will always be about my peace first. Because if I only look at the money, it's too enticing, and I will just chase that, and I will make my whole life about that, and I will not be happy.
Yeah.
And so for me, the piece that I love that I can have 3 to 4 sessions a week. I don't feel overwhelmed. I'm still excited about every client that walks in. I don't do the same poses over and over because I'm excited. Like there's a threshold for me where I still enjoy the art, but I feel secure, and there's space for me to also continue to chase the other things. Now, that said, because what I love is making women feel empowered and beautiful and strong, like the first step was to show them their own value and worth. And then to me, the second step is to connect them to other women who know their value and worth. That's where the second part of magic happens. And that's not even on Meagan magic. That's just me being the catalyst to be like, no, you and you go talk. And like, you guys are, you're a powerhouse. Just go have a conversation. You know? And so for me, maybe it is that I buy some property overseas and I do host. It's weird that you're like I'm not even kidding, like the 20 something person this year alone who's brought that up. Yeah. I've been approached from counselors to different people in breath work or different modalities of ways, Reiki, yoga, meditation, therapy, like different ways that women can connect. And also I'm a pleasure boo. Like give me a Michelin starred restaurant, doll me up. Like I am so here for the main character energy. And it is very easy for me to the point where I'm happy to lay out your runway for you. Let me help you find that main character energy that you should be strutting down. And so I think for me that maybe the next step is something where I have like a retreat once or twice a year that involves all these other people that have, I know my skill set, but I also know where I don't have skills. And I would have somebody there who's a somatic therapist. And then I'd have somebody there who maybe does yoga at sunrise. And then if you want to sleep in and then have I think that women, we were so communal for most of life, like most of history. Mm-hmm. That's the only way we did it, right? Like the subdivision, and now we're a lot more isolated and we're being demanded more of us is being demanded than ever. And that will not hold. Yeah, right. And so when that collapses, I definitely want to have some offerings where I can say, okay, here's how I've been able to reconnect to myself on a personal level. And here's how I think it could maybe help you. And whether it's a podcast, a book, a retreat, a photo shoot with me, like that is the work that I'll keep doing. And I'm not really, it's actually not good business sense for me to not lay that out. But I will say that at the same time that all my business has been very, in some ways by the book and, I can teach it. On the flip side, there's also a dance with the universe that you're doing. And I think that leaning in to help people, like that is, that typically resonates. It always will. Me. Yes. And it always will. And like a simple text, like, hey, Meagan, you need to know this person or you need to know this, with the tax strategy thing. Yeah. Or even, I find that a lot of women, when you bring up boudoir photography in any conversation, a lot of us want to show our pictures. Yeah. Like we're like, okay, let me show you, we pull up our phones and like, oh my gosh. And I have seen some terrible boudoir. I mean, bad, very bad. And I'm like, oh my gosh, not good. And more so than the art piece not being great, but the experience wasn't great for them. And they're like, oh my gosh, was this, was that, and and it just wasn't what it could have. Well, it can absolutely be traumatizing. Yes, and I think I think it's funny because your background, you grew up in a pretty religious family. We probably should have started with. Oh yeah, true. But your background is your religion was Christian. Christian. And I'm still Christian. Yeah. Let me put it this way. I hold it very loosely. And at the end of the day, none of us. God wants you to be happy. Well, we just don't know. Like anybody who's like, this is the thing. I'm like, all right, that's cute. Like I attach to the Jesus story and I love that. There's a lot about Christianity right now I take huge issue with, and I'm comfortable with that. Yeah. I think that, yes, I grew up in a religious home, saved myself for marriage, was a virgin when I got married. So people are like, oh, I didn't know. It's like, no, but I have always seen that sexuality is like, it is 10% or less about sex. Yeah, always. 90% about, especially for a woman, is about your soul. It's about who you are in the bedroom. You do not show up in bed as a mom. That's not what you're trying to be. Like you are a mom, but that you drop the title or CEO, or like you are just a being with thoughts and dreams and passion and ideas, and you want to be seen and belong in the bedroom. Like that's what really boudoir
and that's
photography is.
That's honestly, it's what's taking your business so far, is that you sell that experience. Because you're right, the session with you, even though it's 5 hours long and you're sore the next day, it really has nothing to do with sex. It has everything to do, it's so weird because I tell everyone, I'm like, you've got to go to Meagan O Photography because it's like a counseling session. All that money you spent on therapy, it was so body affirming for women. And I've seen that theme I'm telling you, through all of your client testimonials. Like you have nailed the customer experience. You've nailed it. And it's not even really about the product you're selling, which in any vertical, it doesn't matter if it's, automotive, whatever, people are missing that customer experience. They really are. They're skipping right over it because they're thinking volume and they're thinking money and they're thinking revenue and they're thinking cost of, they're looking at their P&L. And you've proven that if you stop, you invest in the client experience, the money will come.
It's true.
Yeah.
I will say though, I do feel like the perspective was not how do I invest in the client experience. I really believe this. When I look at women, when I have a woman walk in my door and she's got no makeup on and I can see her coffee is spilled on her shirt and I can see that like she's still trying to click her, her van to make sure it's locked. And I can see all the things running in her head and her phone is buzzing and she's walking in and she's trying to take her stuff off and she's out of breath. Like I already see like the stunning woman that she is. And I know who she thinks she is, and I know who I see her as, and I can't wait to just show her the version that I see. But that's not, I don't know, there is something to, I think the most successful you could be is to move into something you care about. Because the fact is, I can take my money now and build wealth, but I will never care nearly as much about those investments as I care about my clients that are walking through the door. But had I decided to go and become like an underwater welder because you can make 6 figures and it's a 2-year schooling or whatever, not to knock that. Totally viable, could make you a lot of money. Yeah. But I don't know how long I would have weathered that. I don't know how happy I would be. I don't know how much peace I would have. And so I think for some people, it can be hard, especially right now. Everything's more expensive. Everyone's talking about it. Like it's easy for it to become a money thing. For me, in my experience, the minute it's a money thing, it doesn't work. I won't get there. I think you can pivot around it. I think you can figure out ways to make it within the business but the fact is like, I love it and I love it for real. And I love it. Like I could win the lottery tomorrow and all I would do is go build a bomb studio and do exactly what I'm doing. Like I wouldn't change it. And I know that that's also, I feel very checked by like the privilege of me being able to sit in this seat and even say something like that. But I say that as an encouragement because there are people who are like, well, I just really love to bake cupcakes, but I could probably never. It's like, then bake cupcakes, babe. Like do that. Like bake cupcakes. Like, I think that, doing the thing that you are happy to wake up at 4 a.m. to do, or like that is what sustains you when the money's not there. When it is, when you have to pivot, when it is like, I'm just going to shoot some things for myself this month because we had so many reschedules or whatever. Like, I think that part is important because there's a lot of talk right now. We're just in an interesting spot in history. I know. There's a lot of entrepreneurs are being born left and right. And I love the platforms like TikTok and stuff that make it more approachable and make it like, you can do this. And I certainly would never want to like dull any of that down. But I think also within that, we are not products. We're humans. We have souls. Like you lean into the thing that delights you inside, that you would do for free, that you would be tickled if like someone asked you to, can you please sew this quilt for my, whatever. Like, I think that is important to keep in mind, especially if you're starting something new that you want to grow into some kind of actual career. Yeah. Because wouldn't you agree? Like, I happen to also enjoy business. So sometimes that also plays in, but I love helping women feel beautiful. Yeah. I love taking pictures. I love the way that I get to do it. Like when in fact, I had 3 weeks I didn't shoot. That's like the longest I've gone in years. And I was like, I'm so eager to do my job. Like I can't wait to have that next client come in that door. And I think that that's important too. I think that for me, at least on the days when it is hard to push, when it is hard to like muscle.
Well, speaking of business, so when you've got to learn, you've got to have the business sense of it. What's one thing that you know now that you wish you knew 9 years ago?
It's not failure. It's a pivot.
What's a hard lesson you had to learn?
I definitely learned a lot of hard lessons in my first studio. I was very codependent and I did not like to make people uncomfortable. I wanted to be liked. So my first studio, I remember she said, well, we could take the ceiling down. We're going to have to anyway and expose the beams, but maybe we could just leave it. And of course, when you hear exposed beams, what do you think? It's beautiful, right? Like it's high ceiling, maybe three, beautiful, like girl,
like a loft.
I walked into this. So she had taken the ceiling off my first studio and exposed beams. I felt like I was looking up under a porch. It was not exposed. There was the stuff they spray, the insulation that was bubbling
like
over.
Foam?
There was, the foam bare. There was like cords and wires hanging down. I was like, this feels sketchy AF. Like I am not, and
I remember that first studio. It was really hot, right?
Yes. Okay. But she basically had said, I think she had to have some stuff done and she didn't want to put the ceiling back up.
Gotcha.
Like that's but I didn't know that at the time. And I heard exposed beams. I'm like, heck yeah, I would love that. So I go in and see it and I realize it looks creepy now. And I'm sorry, you add being half naked to anything and it's going to add a creep factor of like times 1,000. So if we're already creepy and then you have to get naked, like, oh my gosh. And I remember thinking, I can't ask her to put the ceilings back up. Like I can't ask her that she took them down. Like this was how codependent I was when I first opened my studio. And she's actually my studio manager now, but she is also one of my best friends. And she is even more kind of laid back than I am. And she looked at me and she was like, you cannot leave it this way. And when she said that, I was like, all right. And so I had to negotiate that. And then that landlord ended up being pretty terrible. We had a flood within the first 6 weeks that I was open that took out 2 of my floors for 45 days. I had to rent a whole new space, even though I was just finally fully booked. So it was like the business, everything about business was there. The clients were there. The business was there. The studio was there. I had the furniture in, everything was done. And then it was like all these things I had to figure out. And then there was a whole thing with the homeowners association within the building. And anyway, I had to get lawyers involved. I never had to send legal letters and cease and desist type of thing. They were like at one point they were painting cabinets with a varnish that like burned your eye. It was not supposed to be done on site. It's not a premises type of thing. If you've ever been in like my studio, I couldn't, like I was like crying. So I say that because that was all the first like 6 months that I was open, that all of these things happened, that I had to come in and like, so I say that because I don't know that I wish I had known it, but I am so thankful it happened my first 6 months. I was way too nice. Before. And I think you and I share some of this, right? Like you're also a very kind person, but when you've been in business for a minute, and it's funny, it also takes people, because we're so nice and kind and like, they're like, and then the minute we're like, okay, but I'm not super happy with that. Right. They're like, hang on.
But you know what? I always call it kindness with candor. And a coach I used to have, he always said kindness with candor. And so when people like you and I do get to the point of like, we got to talk, put our big girl pants on and I'm not happy in this, but you got to be very clear. You got to say, this is what the issue is. This is what I want to happen. And this is the timeline I want it to happen in. And when that happens, I feel like, God willing, we get what we want because, I was in the franchisee world and franchisees that are throwing a fit and overreacting all the time, they never get what they want because they're like, oh, there's Bob over there just having a meltdown again. But, when you kind of go with the flow and you work with people and something really is wrong, you're like, this is what I want. And I mean, I don't say this to toot my own horn, but I feel like with kindness, with candor, you get what you want.
Right. Well, but for me, it was a tool I didn't have yet. So I had to be.
You have to learn.
It was a little baptism by fire. Like I was like, no.
I was like that with employees at first because I had 30 employees, and all of a sudden I was the boss of 30 people, and I was like, oh my gosh, oh yeah, you were late, sorry. But I got to the point where I was like, kindness with candor, never disrespectful, never yelling.
No.
None of that.
None of that is required. But even for me to have a kind with candor conversation was like hugely
it's a skill. I swear I think that people should teach a class. Like, here's the words, here's the verbs.
Exactly. I'm great at it now. But I would say like, and that's why I can't say it's like something I wish I'd known. I'm just so thankful it didn't. I am glad it happened my first year in business because I moved forward from that. When I negotiated my second contract, like I have that mode that I can slip into that I also feel safe. I know I won't not ask the questions. I know I won't like leave anything unturned. Whereas Meagan before was like, this looks terrible, but I guess we'll leave it. Maybe I can avoid. I remember thinking maybe I could tack sheets up instead of as a business owner saying, hey, this isn't what we talked about. This is not exposed beams. This looks like the underside of a, like there was even holes. Like I was like, are there spiders or I don't know. Just, So I say that because I feel like anything that happened in my business that was really, really hard, I needed it desperately. I needed to know those lessons. Yeah. And I think that's where a lot of entrepreneurs can kind of get like tripped up. Like it's only failure if you're done, right? Like if you pivot, it's not failure. It just took a second, like it just took another turn. This is just the journey that you're on. Yeah. And I think that perspective is a lot more realistic. Yeah. And it is also more forgiving and more honest about the ways that business goes. It is going to ebb and flow.
And there's been a huge eye-opening moment for me because I got into a group of entrepreneurs and it's a pretty high-end group. It's, I'm batting above my, I'm in a group where I'm like, oh, these people are doing way better and they've leveled me up. But what I'm finding is, they've built multi-million dollar businesses, sold them. Mm-hmm. They all have the same challenges. Mm-hmm. If it's a woman or a man, sometimes they've learned how to have kindness with candor. Mm-hmm. They've had someone tear down a ceiling and they were like, oh, I don't want to tell them, but that's got to be fixed. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter. It's just different levels. And it's not pretty. People are like, oh my gosh, Meagan's a business owner and Casey owned a bit. They must be so wealthy and they're just so smart. It's like, no, you really are just pivoting and figuring it out. Or you just swimming along. And then all of a sudden you look up and you're like, oh my gosh, it's working. It's mm-hmm. good. And, and you keep going and you get into something else and you grow and your business will evolve. So any last minute advice you have for the girl who's in her car or the guy that's like really good at photography, has a passion for it, could do it all day long without sleeping or eating, what would you tell them to do?
Go play. If you love something, go play and offer your services. And then when you feel comfortable, charge for those services and do that. And that is business 101, right? Like you love something you do, then do it. And if you need to practice, do it for free. If you feel like you're practiced enough, charge for it. Charge appropriately, but charge for it. And then as you graduate, the thing that I've always promised myself, I would never charge what I wouldn't pay. I would pay the money that I charge to have the service that I provide. I did pay it, actually. I did a boudoir session in 2021 as part of like falling in love with myself after divorce. And the thing is, like, I do value what I'm doing, which is why I would say, like, if you're a dude who thinks that leggings shouldn't cost $100, don't go start a legging company. Like lean into the areas that you feel connected to, and then go play. I mean, and that I think the play is the thing that kind of gets weeded out of us young. Yeah. But that's really the heartbeat of most of those businesses that have been around forever and have done so well, because there was a heartbeat of like something that was really connected to one person that they wanted to bring to the world.
Awesome. You rock.
This is awesome. I know. I loved having that.
Thank you so much for being my guest. And I wish you the best in your business. I love watching it grow.
Thank you.
I send everybody your way.
I always appreciate it.
And I tell them
that word of mouth is how I live. It's the bread and butter.
Anybody says boudoir, I'm like, you got to talk to Meagan O. And I tell them, and then I just start throwing up. Like, I'm like, it's not even about, you're going to be sore. You're going to have to stretch. You're going to have to arch your back. And it's like, it's fun, but then it's also affirming and it's all about you. And then you'll get these photos. And it's just, I love talking about it and I love supporting you because you have magic energy. And
thank you.
I just wish you the best.
So do you. Well, I'm glad you're doing this. I love that you've got a podcast.
Thank you so much, everybody, for listening to the No Clue Inc. podcast, Adventures in Running a Business for Beginners. I hope you found some inspiration in today's episode. If you would go like us and leave us a comment, send us questions. You can listen to this podcast on any of your platforms where you find your favorite podcast shows. Until next time, much love to you all. Have a great day.